carved a place in the history of Canada's nation. The famous five changed the face of our land. They were born in a time that seemed so benign, when ladies were seen but not heard, fair of face and in their place, when meekness was mostly preferred. The five looked around, and everywhere they found the world revolved around men. They said we must fight what is not right, no matter who we may offend. Five women united, and united we're strong. Five women said, now we've begun. They rallied the nation for all generations and fought till the battle was won. Women wanted a voice and a say in the choice of the matters affecting our land. They didn't believe they shouldn't achieve every right freely given to men. So arm in arm from the cities and farms, their voices joined and were heard. Hand in hand, the women of this land fought the fights, won the rights they deserved. Five women united, and united we're strong. Five women said, now we've begun. They rallied the nation for all generations and fought till the battle was won. And fought till the battle was won. Emily Murphy, Henrietta Muir Edwards, Louise McKinney, Irene Harleby, and Nellie McClung. Heroes of mine, the famous five.
And that was the fantastic Carolyn Harley with the Ballad of the Famous Five. So welcome, bienvenue. Thank you very much for joining us today. I love Famous Five Fridays, and I hope you do, because it's a day when women have more power and see more opportunities and hopefully grow in confidence because of the fantastic role models you meet on our panel. Bullying has always been with us, unfortunately, and even the famous five were bullied. They were harassed, and even their children were harassed. Nellie was burnt in effigy for suggesting that women have the right to vote and the right to seek elected office, but they persevered. And today, with the advice from our fantastic panelists and the spirit of the famous five within us, we too shall persevere and achieve our goals. Indigenous sisters, the Indigenous women, have persevered greatly over thousands and thousands of years, and we're very grateful for the leadership they have given to North America. And this is our acknowledgement that we must know the authentic history of North America and Canada. And by continuing the discussion about how best we can all live together, we are taking an important step towards reconciliation, because we are all treaty people. We are all treaty people. So miigwech to our Indigenous sisters. Introducing our panel today is Carolyn Montague. Carolyn is a senior partner with a company in Ottawa called Performance Management Network, Inc. This is a company that's an expert in program evaluation, in performance management, and also complex procurement strategies, I'm just amazed at the brain power that Carolyn has and is bringing to others, be they in government, corporations, or educational institutions like Algonquin College. Carolyn has a master's in public administration and is the treasurer of the Famous Fives Foundations Committee in Ottawa. So it is with much pleasure that I call upon Carolyn to introduce our fantastic panel today. And I say thank you very much, Carolyn, for all your contributions to the Famous Five Foundation and today. Over to you.
I'm very pleased to introduce the moderator and panelists for our session today on cyberbullying, youth, mental health, and building resilience. Dr. Gail Beck will guide the conversation today. She's the interim psychiatrist-in-chief and chief of staff at the Royal Ottawa Hospital. Her current clinical work is on the Youth Inpatient Psychiatry Program and in the Adolescent Day Treatment Unit. She has a long history of working in youth mental health and has been recognized for this work through awards such as the Order of Ontario. In terms of panelists, we have three. Claudia Lang Dion is a recent graduate of the George Brown College Social Service Worker Program. She's an advocate for mental wellness and brings her lived experience to our conversation. Giovanni Mingarelli is both a technical entrepreneur and thought leader. She has worked in the field of political and digital communications for over 20 years. She's been recognized as a keynote speaker relating to the advancement of young women through her work with Equal Voice and the Women's History Project. Faye Johnstone is a trans woman and queer advocate. She's a leading advocate for queer and trans communities' rights, health, and safety. She's the executive director of Wisdom to Action, a national company specializing in community engagement, organizational development, and 2SL LGBTQIA+ inclusion. I give you Gail, Claudia, Giovanni, and Faye.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great honor for me to moderate this panel this afternoon, and I just want to begin briefly by reminding us all what bullying is, and specifically cyberbullying. Bullying is the repetitive and intentional hurting, and I will say this definition is taken from the Anti-Bullying Alliance's definition. So this is the repetitive, intentional hurting of one person or group by another person or group, where the relationship involves an imbalance of power. It can be physical, verbal, or psychological, and it can happen face-to-face and online. And we're going to focus this afternoon on cyberbullying. Knowing that social media and the World Wide Web have made it much easier to engage in bullying and to leverage a power imbalance. And I look forward to hearing from our panelists on this topic. Who would like to start? Claudia, maybe.
Maybe, yeah. I guess I'll start. I guess I'll just talk about, my experience in general and tie in bullying and cyberbullying. And just so I know, how long should I be talking for, just so everyone has enough time to speak? What'd you say?
A couple of minutes, yeah. And if people sort of join in, I'll just stop if it gets too raucous.
Perfect. Sounds like a plan. Yeah. So as Gail Beck said, my name is Claudia, and I guess I say in a recovery journey constantly. My story started out when I was younger, faced bullying over, the course of my youth. It started very young. I'm not exactly sure why that happened. I've had a variety of mental health struggles throughout my life, so I believe that has played a part into it. Often categorized as the weird kid, never really fit in anywhere, and that turned into bullying and then eventually cyberbullying online. And I often internalized a lot of those messages and didn't ask for the right support. So I was internalizing all these messages that I was getting from, peers around me, or things I was seeing online about me, or things that I did, or about who I was. And I internalized that. And I know this is not part of the conversation, but I do think it's important to share that ultimately I ended up struggling greatly with addiction. And I'm proud to say that I've overcome that. But that was a result of all the internalized messages that I received from like the people around me. And I think the most important thing, just in terms of supports and, you know, what I needed in that moment, and just, I guess, just some advice or whatnot. And I know it seems very basic, but just being able to have safe conversations with people that are not going to react in a way where they're trying to rescue you or take over. So for example, when I would share that I was struggling, let's say I was getting, you know, someone was harassing me online or whatnot, there was often this fear response, which is natural, right? People want to save you from that. And sometimes it actually ends up making it worse. Instead of asking the person, what do you need from me, right? Which is, the person can only really tell you that. So, you know, and I think just with the increase in, you know, in social media and all that, it's a lot easier to, you know, be a bully and not, you know, because we're all hiding behind screens. So I'm sure I'll have more to say as kind of other people talk and questions come, but you know, it sounds cheesy, but I just want to say, you know, like, it's good to reach out, have people around you that, you know, that you feel safe with. And yeah, just keep the conversation going, because that's where the power, you know, continues. So yeah.
Thank you, Claudia. One of the things that I'll say is that a lot of times when I'm talking with youth and they say something that sounds overly emotional to them, is they'll call it, as you did, cheesy. And I'll remind them that saying any of those emotionally laden things is not cheesy. It's
Yes,
good.
that's true.
And so recognizing the courage of everybody today who's joined to speak out is very important. Maybe Giovanna, you can tell us a little bit of your story. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dr. Beck and Claudia. Thank you so much for sharing what you did. One of the things that I think is required in conversations like these is a lot of courage, right? Like nobody, I think, finds it easy to join a webinar and a panel and talk so vulnerably. And in fact, vulnerability is one of the things that bullies attack, right? And so one of the purposes of cyberbullying is to publicly shame and humiliate an individual who is perceived to be vulnerable. And it's deeply unfortunate that this happens. In Canada, the statistic today is that 1 in 10 young people between the ages of 18 and 24, and this is only reported statistics, have been cyberbullied. Teachers, so 89% of Canadian teachers broadly believe that cyberbullying is the #1 threat to students at school today, right? So that's really, really significant. If we look at mainstream media, if we look at yesterday, right? So there are a number of people just yesterday that were talking publicly about cyberbullying. One would be Pink. So the artist that, you know, many of us love, Pink, who is a very, very public speaker and supporter of LGBTQ rights, you know, was actually trolled on her birthday. And she was attacked. And in fact, the attacks were quite transphobic. Pink didn't actually consider them to be the attacks in that way. But she had to explain to her 4-year-old daughter why someone was attacking her on her birthday and being mean to her and the other person that this troll was attacking. How does Pink explain to her 4-year-old daughter, right, like why a person would do this? And she basically just described it as deep ignorance. Because at the end of the day, right, when people are cruel and are behaving in ways that are just so abhorrent, there is a level of ignorance. You know, call it a lack of education, call it a lack of empathy, you know, lack of discrimination, whatever you want. But at the end of the day, cyberbullying is very real. Another person that we would probably all know is Lady Gaga, right? Who's spoken really publicly about her cyberbullying. In fact, when she was at NYU studying to be a singer, she's now one of the most famous musicians in the world, a group of other students who were very cruel actually set up a Facebook page to continue their elaborate bullying. The Facebook page was called, Stephanie, You Will Never Be Famous. So, I mean, they can, eat their words now because Lady Gaga is one of the most famous women in the world. But like, that is the extent to which some people will go. And so the last piece, because this is the Famous Five and we're talking about women in politics, that I want to share as an example is Monica Lewinsky. So Monica Lewinsky in the 90s was ground zero for what we now know is kind of public shaming and like deep trolling. They didn't have social media back then, but essentially what she experienced was the first time in recorded history that a woman was internationally publicly shamed at the age of 24. It's horrifying, right? And so she actually, and I'll get into this a little bit later in the conversation, but she launched a cyberbullying campaign called In Real Life back in 2017, which is still going, called Click with Compassion, to try and raise awareness, which has been supported internationally, including the organization that I'm the chair of in Canada called Global Dignity. Anyway, I'm gonna stop there, but I think this is a really important conversation. I'm honored and delighted to be here with all of the honored panelists, and looking forward to continuing.
And finally, maybe I'll ask Clay Johnstone to tell us a little bit about her experience and thinking about, especially all three of you as we move along, what has helped you to be as courageous as you've all been?
And thanks so much, Gail. And it's an honor and a pleasure to be here today. I think cyberbullying is an integral topic right now. And I think it's also important to situate it. I think there was a trend where we talked about bullying in schools a lot in the late 2000s and early 2010s. And it became dressed up. And I think something we became a bit desensitized to. It became like kids just aren't being nice to each other. And we didn't take it seriously as expressions of abuse, harassment, and manipulation of power. So I think it's important to ground ourselves in that and to recognize that it exists well beyond just what happens in a high school, though that is indeed a site of great conflict when it comes to bullying. When it comes to my own experience, so I do a lot of advocacy on queer and trans issues. I jokingly say that I am one of the people who gets the call from a journalist when something bad happens and it involves gay people. And so I often am dealing with, a public platform on queer and trans issues. And over the course of the past year or so, I've been targeted time and again for doing so. I've had some of the, so what I'm trying to say here is that bullying happens not just in a school classroom, but that there are, targeted and intentional campaigns zeroing in on different folks that happen to exist in public life. So for me, I have had, far-right media like Rebel News, fixate on me and share information about me. I've had to move hotels because the location of the hotel I'm in has been posted online. In March, I was included in a International Women's Day campaign for Hershey's Canada and had my face on a chocolate bar, which was an incredible honor, and especially to give that representation to young trans people who very rarely see themselves in those spaces. And then I had security guards on me for 7 days straight following, outside of my door, accompanying me everywhere I went because the degree of hate targeted at me was so significant. To this day, I have folks who have dug up, pictures of me from before I came out as trans, who've found my old name and shared it publicly, and otherwise are engaging in a sustained, icky tsunami of things. And the things that have kept me going through it, so I think that is a nice strength-based way to close this opening, is I think, the communities that support us, it is my friends, my family, and it's also the organizations and individuals who speak up and say, this is unacceptable conduct. There's a real risk that this becomes the norm, and I think it is becoming our norm. And so we need those public acknowledgements and those public, outcries around these incidents. But I think the thing that keeps me going is, if you're pissing people off, it means you're also doing something right. And we are in a world where I think more folks need to stand up and say that we're not going to tolerate hate, harassment, bullying, or anything like that towards any Canadians, that we believe in human rights and dignity, and that should actually supersede everything else. Thank you.
So thank you everyone for a terrific opening and for focusing on a couple of things that I think are important. That remember that bullying comes from a power imbalance, and that taking back your power and finding a way to take back your power is a way to overcome those feelings of shame and guilt that arise for no reason. So take back the power is one way to keep yourself resilient. I believe it was Claudia who mentioned, maybe Giovanna, that there were reports that 10% of adolescents are bullied. I would say that that's quite low. So while I suspect that's higher, the one thing that we can say from data collected in our own youth program at the Royal is that over 80% of the young people we see in a mental health setting say that they have been bullied. And I think that that's important. And that in terms of courage, it takes a lot of courage to stand up to the people bullying you. It takes a lot of courage to speak out in situations like this. But more importantly, when you do have your mental health affected by bullying, it takes a lot of courage to sort of seek the help that you need. Every young person who walks into my office is very courageous, and I recognize that much of the time and feel grateful for that kind of work. Other consequences of bullying, other things for people to watch for, and how can the grown-ups around young people being bullied, how can they help? And just feel free to jump in and start.
I guess I'll just start just something that when you were talking about, how did we, move through that and kind of get through that. And I mean, there's no clear answer. And I think, obviously everyone's different and different things will work for different people. But just for myself, just even the messages that and it's interesting that you said about the power dynamic imbalance, because that's exactly what it is, right? And that's people thinking they're better than, or, because I'm not like that, I'm better. It's just like constantly people trying to, I guess, one up. I'm not sure if that's making sense, but anyways, for me, it was, I got to a point where I was sick and tired of letting other people tell me who I was. And I think, I mentioned my addiction before. A lot of that was just numbing and coping and trying to, dissociate from this image of this person who I thought I was, right? And I think the turning point was, I remember it was a clear day for me. I woke up one day and I said, this is enough, right? It's time for me to start finding out who I am and the strengths that I possess, right? And so just finding out who I am and keeping my head up high. And I guess I don't really know what to say in terms of how to support someone. I mean, just having those hard conversations, right? And being mindful, I guess, if you have children, of the signs that sometimes my behavior got excused, not just by my parents, but like just by adults, in my life, of, it's just behavior of a teenager, right? And that's also a lot of the time not the case. So I'll pass it on to the next person, but yeah.
Giovanna or Kay, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. So just building on what Claudia, you shared, one of the key factors behind bullying is also shame. And sometimes, in many different situations, right, people will accept cruelty because they're ashamed, and for some reason, they're afraid to talk about it. It doesn't mean that anyone's deserving of it. It doesn't mean that the person deserves it or wants it, right? But like the fear of retribution and further pain can stop, kids and people who are being harassed and being treated cruelly from actually telling someone about it. So I think it's really important, with bullying to find ways for people, like you said, Claudia, to just, to be able to talk about it without feeling afraid and ashamed of it, because it's the belief that, the belief and the fear, the real fear of retribution that can often enable it, and then perpetuate really, really vicious and often terrifying cycles for the person that is receiving the bullying. And so I think it's a combined, like, in-person and also virtual approach, right? So UNICEF has talked about, you know, in terms of their approach and how they deal on a school-wide level internationally with bullying. One, you know, the person needs to address it, talk to someone that they feel safe with. It can be anyone, right? Parent, teacher, brother, sister, friend. But then at the same time, you need to be looking at online tools to protect yourself, right? So like some forms of online bullying and cyber harassment include taking over people's social media accounts. Make sure that you have like protected social media accounts that no one can get access, right? TikTok and Snapchat both actually have their own tools that people can use to prevent cyberbullying. You know, Snapchat actually has a forum specifically for cyberbullying. So some of the major social networks have taken this quite seriously. So being both practical, right, about the realities of cyberbullying is real. Young people need to be protected. You know, young people probably should have the tools and the knowledge, right, at this point to protect themselves from it technologically. But then also, you know, the confidence to report it. And I think that for me is the biggest fear, right? Is that bullying happens because we are all vulnerable and we're allowed, and we, you know, vulnerability is a strength. But when it's used against someone harmfully and hatefully, I mean, it's terribly destructive. And so giving people the tools to feel safe to talk to someone, I mean, and then it goes without saying, providing greater education to the bullies themselves. Anyway, that's another conversation for today.
Thank you. Faye.
Yeah, I think these folks have covered it, but I think I would emphasize, you know, a diversity of opportunities to bring a disclosure or to share forward. And I think, you know, we need to find a way on our side to better connect those, because I worry that someone will tell a counselor, and then how does it get, and how do we treat it with the degree of severity it needs? I think also recognizing that you don't, like, if we're hearing a report or if somebody's telling us an experience, we don't need to like put a value or a degree of impact on that. We don't need to make a judgment around like how bad was in that moment. If someone's coming towards us and saying this thing happened, our job is to say, you know, I'm sorry, how can I help? Not, but like, oh, or are you sure? And then to also make sure that we recognize the different forms of bullying will look different as well, so that we're, you know, cyberbullying is a whole category of bullying, and even under it, the motivations, the tactics, like there will be a lot under it that isn't always easy to capture in a policy or response. So just making sure we have that flexibility to understand different kinds and sources too.
One of the things I'd like to mention, I noticed one of the panels in saying my name, and please call me Dan, did show a power that I have, and that is the Dr. Beck power. So I have an expertise, and that gives me a certain power. So one of the things that I feel it's incumbent upon me to do, or anyone who feels who has some expertise, who has a platform, is to call out the bullying that is presently occurring, in some cases at a state-sanctioned level, the banning of books in schools, the kind of thing we see going on even in Canada, where if children want to choose a different name or different pronouns, that have to be reported to families. Calling that out for what it is, a kind of bullying, is also very important for people with a platform and a position of power to do. I wonder if any of the panelists have any experience or thoughts about that.
I have to, I mean, this is my life these days, is responding to this, right? So maybe to situate, we're seeing what I would describe as a rollback on the rights of trans and gender diverse students in the classroom in both New Brunswick and in Saskatchewan, with hints of it coming in Ontario, Alberta and Manitoba, and possibly Quebec in the near future. And I think this the specifics of the policy are something we can chat about. It is essentially allowing trans kids to come out at school without requiring parental permission. It recognizes that students deserve autonomy and also that not all kids are safe to be out at home. But what this contributes to is a social environment that is even more hostile to queer and trans students' identities. This is not happening out of nowhere. This is happening when we're seeing rising hate and a lot of rhetoric about what's going on around queer and trans kids' safety in schools that has been manipulated in very toxic ways. And so I think what I really want to emphasize here is that we're touching on a lot is the connection between power and bullying and how that power also exists in our social environments. And the way that we think about certain communities, the ways that we introduce policies that might restrict or stigmatize them further contributes to those unsafe environments in schools. Students are looking at what their educators, what their families, what their friends are putting out into the world. And if they're going into the classroom saying that, seeing that it's more okay to call a gay kid a slur because you're seeing this, hate in your social environment, that means more kids get bullied. That means that more kids are unsafe. So I really want to emphasize that, this is about safe schools for everybody. All kids deserve respect, but these policies will roll that back and worsen that environment for some kids who are just trying to be kids.
So if I could build on that, Faye, thank you so much for that powerful statement. So one of the things that I'd like to add to of things that happened yesterday, the province of Nova Scotia made the second Thursday of the school year, they legislated that the second Thursday of every school year be Pink Shirt Day, which is an anti-bullying day. This happened yesterday, right? So it's funny that, it's not funny, it's unfortunate, but also good that, people are being more aware, that schools are bringing more awareness, and that all of this happened, within the context of this panel. It's all very timely. But one of the things I wanted to share is, if we look at the root cause of bullying, right, there's the deep ignorance, there's insecurity, there's hate, jealousy, all kinds of reasons why people do it. But at the core of it, and this is one of the things that I focus on a lot in my nonprofit work, is that, I believe that everyone has the right to lead a dignified life, right? So everyone has value. Everyone in and of themselves is worthy of kindness and love and respect. Just because they're alive, it doesn't matter who you are, what you look like, color, it's so basic, but everyone is worth being treated with kindness. And so I'm actually really proud of Canada that a couple of years ago, with the leadership of the late Rabbi Reuven Bulka, that Canada passed the first National Kindness Week, which is now the second week of February, every week forever, right? It's law now that, Canada wishes as a country for, governments, organizations, schools, companies, individuals, to collectively share tools and resources that will enable greater kindness in our country, because it's believed that that will lead to greater health and well-being for our citizens. I think this is awesome. And we're the only country in the world to do it. And I can tell you, I've had conversations with very senior cabinet ministers in the United Arab Emirates and also in Mongolia, right? Two very different countries from ours, who are very interested in National Kindness Week in their countries. And so I believe that if we can bring greater kindness, if Canada could be responsible, right, for exporting something to the rest of the world, because we compete every year with Finland and Denmark to be the kindest country in the world, right? It's a very good competition to be in. I think that would be a great thing for us to do as Canada. So anyway, I wanted to share that because, right, the flip side of bullying, right, bullying is hate and it's cruelty and it's ignorant. And kindness is love and compassion, and it grows and it's prosperous, right? So if we could do more of the kindness, and I think if we could help children, just understand that other people are worthy and have dignity and are loved and are lovable, and what that means and what that looks like, rather than the hate and the cruelty and the bullying and the ignorance, we would save ourselves a lot of time by the time kids got to high school and then later to university, right? If we just cut it off at the butt in elementary school, that's a conversation that I'm always really excited to have, and I think would help a lot of people.
Claudia.
Yeah, and just to touch on what you said, Giovanna, just about kindness and, recognizing that we all have strengths, right? It's so easy to focus on what is not great in someone, but we all have these strengths. And sometimes we just need to be given, the lift up to find those, right? Or whatnot. And you're right, kindness is such an important thing. It's so, I guess maybe people judge to try to get a better understanding of the world. I'm not exactly sure, or categorize, different people to try to better understand how our society works. But, at the end of the day, everyone, like I said before, we all have strengths within us. And it's, sometimes those messages just get through and we don't believe those, but, just leaning back on those at the end of the day. So yeah, I feel like I don't know, I don't have much to say, but I mean, yeah, we all have strengths, guys. I think that's just the thing. So
thinking about strength, about truth to power, about programs that can counteract, all of those are important ways that all of us can offset some of the problems with bullying. The next part of our program gives us an opportunity to have questions from some students, young women at the Uville Center in Ottawa. And we're going to start this part by listening to Celeste's question. Celeste enjoys anime and reading. And Celeste, what is your question this afternoon?
Why do we even need a cyberbullying campaign in the first place?
Okay, well, who would like to start with that?
I feel like I haven't gone first yet, so I can hop in really quick. Young folks who are being cyberbullied need to be shown that somebody cares, and that in and of itself, that show of support, I think, means a lot. Second, we still have a cyberbullying crisis. Cyberbullying leads to poor mental health, to anxiety, depression. It leads to young folks not being able to graduate on time. It leads to costs on a social, economic, and Lord, we should just let kids be healthy and happy level. And so I think it is an unfinished thing, and we got to keep going until something changes.
If I could build on that, I mean, I fully agree, Faye, and with your wise words. And I'd like to add as well, we need cyberbullying campaigns to bring awareness, right? So unfortunately, often the reasons that people behave the way that they do is because for one reason or another, sometimes they're fully aware that their actions are cruel and harmful, but sometimes they're not, right? Like sometimes people jump on the bandwagon of hate and cruelty because they see other people, right? And so campaigns, I think, are important to raise awareness, right, about the fact that cyberbullying is real. And then as a secondary measure, but not of lesser importance, I think it's important in the process of educating the bullies that their behavior is not okay and making them aware of their behavior and how it harms people. And then the final piece as to why I believe that cyberbullying campaigns are important is for accountability. And I think, for organizations that are working with children and young people, teens, and, I think like schools, so K-12, high school, university in particular, cyberbullying is important for the possibility of schools being able to actually capture, document what's happening, and then enforce measures to create greater legislation, activities, and more campaigns to prevent cyberbullying and the abuse of students, and to increase campaigns that lead to greater love, kindness, and compassion and inclusion in schools, so that later when those same students go off into the workplace, they're not going to be harassing their colleagues and then transferring their youthful hate into hate in the workplace, which is a totally different conversation and is also real, but beyond the scope of, I think, today.
Yeah, I definitely think a cyberbullying campaign is needed to continue the conversation, right? And to not give the power, to the people who are bullying or whatnot, to, kind of what Giovanna said, to to make it seem like this is okay, because it's not, right? And you know, it's interesting as well too, because the behavior of bullying is terrible, but I always ask myself, you know, what is going on in, you know, in that person's life that's causing them to feel that way, right? So what support can be implemented there as well too? And you know, the cyberbullying campaigns, as Giovanna said, is not just for the people who are getting bullied, it's also for the bullies as well too, because maybe they're transferring the experiences they're having at home and projecting that onto other people, right? So what supports can be put in place for them? And you know, just if we don't keep talking about it, then people will think that it's not a problem. And, you know, it's a problem that has been going on for a while. And, you know, like you said, in different environments, right? And it's unfortunate that even as adults, even some even some highly known adults that, you know, have high presence online or bullying others, or I can't think of someone that comes to mind now, but just putting down others. And what message does that give about how we are as a society, right? So yeah.
I think you've all underlined one of the most important reasons for cyberbullying campaigns, and those are that it really reminds people what bullying is. So I often find with the young people that I see that if I ask them if they've been bullied, sometimes people will say no. But if I ask them, have you ever had people call you names? Have you ever had people sarcastically speak to you all the time about one thing or another that you said you liked? That really what happens is that cyberbullying campaigns will remind people of what cyberbullying actually is. So that just as Claudia suggested, somebody who's bullying someone may not even realize that their behavior is incorrect. And maybe for a few people who don't realize it will help them to know. But even more importantly, it's important to let the people who are being bullied know that what's happening to them is not correct, and to support them so that they can begin to be stronger themselves. Let's move on now to our next student question, which comes from Alastriona. And she enjoys art, reading, and nature walks. What's your question, please, Alastriona?
What is a side effect of cyberbullying?
Anybody like to start?
I'll just say a quick little thing. And just to, it kind of glitched out. Was the question, just to clarify, was the side effects of cyberbullying, correct? Yeah, so I think the main one is just lack of self-confidence, which trickles in, you know, into other areas of your life. Kind of what I shared earlier, side effects of cyberbullying, like addiction, right, to numb it, or other self-destructive behaviors that are maybe are not the healthiest. You know, there's so many mental health, there's so many different, you know, side effects that are usually not positive, right? And affect not just one area of your life, but kind of trickle into others. So yeah, there's lots of side effects, and as I said, usually not negative or positive, sorry.
I mean, like, maybe just to add again, like I'm situating, you know, cyberbullying within this like broader world of, again, the workplace harassment. Like, it can lead to folks having their like autonomy violated. It can lead to people being like subjected to violence. It can lead to people taking their lives. It can lead to this whole range of like adverse impacts that go in extremes of folks' lives being changed forever, to, you know, things that folks can learn and cope and manage through. But we really are talking about a whole spectrum. You know, in my life, I have to take steps when I'm doing events to disclose, like, to avoid bad people knowing where I might be and when. I have to think about what information I'm putting out online all of the time. Like, there are these very, you know, real implications. And there is the emotional impact, you know, like to have like folks who are, you know, fixated on you. And that includes, again, like I'm talking teenagers bullying each other, and I'm talking a world like that we adults walk in. And it happens, you know, the impact is the same. It's shame, it's stigma, it's trying to make folks hate themselves, and trying to send a message that, you know, some groups have more power and are better than others.
And so to add to what both of you, Claudia and Faye, so aptly shared, one of the side effects of bullying is, there's the reality of bullying in the moment at school or at work, but the long-term implications can lead to really deep psychological traumas that can be hard, like really hard for someone to come back from. And, someone mentioned Amanda Todd in the chat. Amanda Todd, unfortunately, took her life, right, due to cyberbullying. And this is unfortunately more common than I think anyone would wish to believe. And the horror of it is that, when cyberbullying gets really bad, again, it's about someone or a group of people who perceive themselves to be more powerful than another or better than another or whatever, ganging up and attacking another person. And, that person, if they don't have the tools or the ability to get out, they just have to deal with it until it's done, right? And sometimes it just doesn't end. So I think the long-term implications are people can stop going to school, right? They start dropping out of classes. This affects their careers in the future. They can be unable to maintain a job. It can lead to long-term depression, right? Like, conditions that can last into their adult lives, right? If you're young, you're a student, it can lead to making it very difficult for a person for the rest of their life, right? If taken to the extreme, to maintain employment, to have friends, to be in a relationship, to have a partnership. I don't think people understand like how much their actions can affect someone, right? When a bunch of kids are just bullying someone or ganging up on someone, if they knew like what that would do to someone in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, especially if the person is hidden behind shame and unable to deal, that's again part of the bullying. I think it would be different, right? Like if people actually knew and understood the long-term implications of their actions, I wish that it would be different. So anyway, I wanted to share that there's the immediate, right? There's the immediate effects, and then there's the long-term effects. And sometimes the long-term effects are actually worse than the immediate.
Maybe just to finish this off, because people talk about missing school and the most extreme effect, which is that some young people are driven to take their own lives. On any given national census data from the United States shows that on any given day, 16,000 children between the ages of 11 and 15 miss school, giving bullying as a reason. That just gives you an idea of the extent of the problem. Finally, we're going to hear from Najima, whose hobbies are cooking, cleaning. Wouldn't you like to have her around for a while? And hair and makeup artistry. And Najima, what is your question for us this afternoon?
Are schools doing enough about cyberbullying?
What do you think? Are schools doing enough about cyberbullying?
Just on the queer and trans student side, the release, I think something like 70% of trans students report being victims of bullying, and an even higher range of those students, many of those being victims of cyberbullying or other forms of bullying. And so I think our schools are trying their best. I think it is, however, an area where it's a complex issue, and how do you ensure a robust response? And there are so many complicating factors: a young person's willingness or ability to report, the availability of resources and policies that actually work to address it. We've done a lot in the anti-bullying space that I think didn't do anything. And I say that with love to the entire anti-bullying space, but a lot of this was we need to be nice to people. And there wasn't this moment where we thought, what are the evidence-based practices? How do we take a whole of school approach? How do we recognize bullying as a systemic issue rather than an isolated one? So I think our schools are getting there, and I think we've come a long way in 10 years. But I think we're still figuring out what is the right way to respond and to make sure we're being systematic in that response.
So to build on that, I saw that Linda in the chat, you made a comment about cyberbullying and the need for strong legislation nationally. So unfortunately, there is no cyberbullying legislation in Canada today. There is in the criminal code, legislation around harassment, right? So the kind of standard, like you can't punch someone in the face, right? And that's okay, right? The police will come and get you if someone charges you. But it doesn't address cyberbullying. There is one new bill that is very relevant, especially to teenage students in high school. I think it's Bill C-13, and that will prevent someone from distributing personal images of an individual online without that person's consent, and then forcing the takedown of those images. I think that's a really big win. I think the fact that has happened in Canada is positive. The biggest issue is that there isn't an international standard for cyberbullying, and therefore, and no legislation internationally taken to the school level, right? Schools are basically dealing with like what they've got. And then you have parents with different views, and then you've got all the kids with their own views. And then, so without an actual enforceable like legislation, it's really hard for the school to come back to a parent and say, well, because of blank, 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 like legislation, right? Like your son or daughter, right, who's been bullying to the point of blank, this student can't come to school here anymore, or they have XYZ, they have to atone, right? If that's the right word, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but they have to do XYZ to make things better with that student. In a more calm setting, or in a more peaceful or reconciliatory setting, sometimes it's better for the schools to actually help rebuilding the relationship. So sometimes relationships are reconcilable where bullying has been taking place, especially amongst younger students. And sometimes that is possible, right? So the school to be in a position to be able to actually help rebuild a relationship between students, instead of like, the really extreme, expelling one or so on and so forth. Ideally, it doesn't have to get to that in general. Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Claudia, what can you add?
Yeah, I'll actually, if it's okay, I'm going to pass on this question just because I don't really know too much about what's going on with the school systems and with what they're doing addressing bullying. So I just don't want to say something just to say it. So I'll pass on this one. Okay,
so maybe I'll add a little bit to this. One of the things that I think that we could all do is support teachers a bit more. We know that across the country in Canada, teachers themselves are the victims of violence in schools, and they need our support in terms of the work that they're doing. Some of the first people to speak out against legislation that would oblige them to speak to parents when a child wants to use a different name or different pronoun. Some of the first objections came from teachers themselves, and I think that that's important to remember, and that they need our support as much as anyone. The other thing I think it's really important to do in public and on social media in particular, where people seem to become extremely brave, is to call out bullying when you see it, and to support those people who are being clearly bullied online. And some people have this happening to them more rather than others because of differences. So hate crimes are on the rise in Canada, and it is certainly time as advocates to go to government and say it's time to build better legislation against hate. And those kinds of things are things we can all do. We can support teachers and those trying to reduce bullying and to support children and youth who are being bullied and people at work who are being bullied. And we can encourage governments to legislation that is anti-bullying. Any other thoughts about this?
So, if I could add on a more empowering and super positive note. So, as I mentioned previously, I'm the Canadian chair for a non-religious, non-political nonprofit called Global Dignity, founded by Crown Prince Haakon of Norway, and the past board chair globally for the last 2 years. And we empower 8 million kids in 80 countries with free tools and resources to host dignity workshops in their schools, which range anywhere from like 20-minute workshops to half-day school-wide plenaries. In Canada, we've received the support of all of the political party leaders, and we've been around for about 10 years in Canada. Global Dignity, a couple of years ago, with COVID, had been receiving a lot of kind of messages from different people saying, hey, like, what's being done to help students feel empowered during COVID with all the isolation and so on, and all the fear. And so we launched a globally crowdsourced kindness campaign called Unite Kindness, so hashtag Unite Kindness. And basically, Unite Kindness aggregates kindness campaigns from all around the world. And we partnered with UNESCO to help us get this message out around the world. And to date, we've crowdsourced about 3 million acts of kindness across 40 different campaigns. And the reason I raise this as part of this conversation is because, you know, one of the things that we can focus on, and we talked about this as part of the panel in the last hour, is actually focusing on the kindness, right? So start helping young people understand what kindness looks like through photos and videos, make really clear examples and demonstrations of what kindness is, because again, like sometimes students, unfortunately, have not been brought up in situations where perhaps they've been treated with kindness, right? And sometimes they've been treated cruelly, and that's what they know, and that's really, really sad, right? And so from that perspective, sometimes students need to like have really focused conversations and activities to help them understand this is what kindness looks like. When you do this, you are being kind. Like when you smile at someone in the hallway, you're being kind. When you frown at them, they might think badly about themselves for the next 2 hours because they think you hate them, right? Like there's such simple things, and so Unite Kindness is really intended to just be a practical approach to helping students all across Canada, to really delve deeper into what kindness means, what it looks like on a very practical level. And Unite Kindness is also part of the National Kindness Week activities, which Global Dignity has been. We've done a press conference and activities for the last couple of years. So I wanted to share that.
Thank you very much. That's the last word to you in our conversation. Thank all of you. Tu m'es Merci beaucoup. Moving on now, I'd like to introduce Sheila Gervais. And Sheila is a member of the Famous Five Foundation from Ottawa. Sheila.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be representing the Famous Five Foundation's Ottawa Committee, particularly because we're celebrating and learning so much from these astonishing, extraordinary women from Ottawa, three of whom I have known for a very long time. So I'm very happy to do that. As I was listening to all of you, there were some key words that I heard, and I think they're all associated with all of you, but some came through a little bit more from one than the other. The first is power, and that one I am associating with Gail, because Gail is the one who introduced to us the concept of the power imbalance and admonished all of us to take back the power in the context of this conversation. Gail, as we know, is very accomplished, and I find what to most of us would seem to be a very difficult field, that of youth and adolescent mental health. But I imagine it's also because it's a very caring area. And what could be more important than the young psyche to care about? So thank you very much, Gail, for taking care of our youth and for guiding us on this discussion today. The second word that came up quite a bit in the conversation was courage. And that courageousness, again, I attribute to all of you, but to you, Claudia, your courageousness is inspiring. It always has been. I know of your strength of character, and I know where it comes from. And I think we've all been very inspired by hearing from you today and being courageous in our face, so to speak. So thank you very much, Claudia, for being with us and expressing your experiences. The next, more of a concept that came up quite a bit is that of advocacy. And that I associate with Faye quite clearly. I think there's no more inspirational or better advocate than someone who lives and breathes the knowledge and the experience, and like you do, Faye, and you're a very strong-willed advocate. And we appreciate very much that advocacy and the expression of it for us today. And there are other two that are combined, but dignity and kindness came up quite a bit. And those I am associating today, again, with all of you, but with Gio, for not just the expertise that she brings and the knowledge that she brought to us today, but for the work that she has done with Global Dignity and for educating us on the importance of kindness. And if you'll bear with me, I just have to say, every day I go for a walk in the park. And today I had to take a picture of a little rock that I saw sitting beside a tree. And I don't know if you can really read this. It's probably going to get washed out. However, that little rock says, be kind, don't be mean, and stand up for others. And I think that was my omen today for the inspiring discussion that we've had. So thank you all very much on behalf of the Famous Five Foundation and the Ottawa Committee.
Thank you very much, Sheila. Beautifully said. And I echo too, of course, your eloquent appreciation of our panel. And one of the things we do at our virtual Pink Teas is we have a toast. So I'm wondering if you have your glass, your mug, or perhaps your teacup, and we can give a toast to each and every one of these panelists, participants, and the wonderful students at UVille. To everybody who is courageous, an advocate, kind, and has courage. Thank you. And our second toast is to a magnificent woman who was the executive director of the Royal Commission on the Status of Women, and who later became a Liberal MP and cabinet minister of health. And she secured Medicare for Canadians because she drafted and had passed the Canada Health Act, and also the Child Benefit Act, and many, many other things. And of course, went on to have an academic career at the University of Ottawa. We're going to miss Monique Béjean terribly. So I'm wondering if we might raise a toast to the magnificent, the honorable Monique Béjean. Thank you, Monique. Merci. Merci, merci, merci. And now I'm going to ask that the panelists just put their audio and visual on hold for a couple of minutes while I bring you Famous Five News. And the first is to invite you, if you are in the Calgary area, to come to a pink tea in person. And this is going to happen on, sorry, we need another slide. This is going to happen on October the 15th. when we gather at the Fairmont Palliser Hotel, one of only 4 places, thank you, one of only 4 places where the Famous Five were all together. So we'll be celebrating the 94th anniversary of the Person's Case, the first significant international declaration of equality. Canadians generated that. 5 all-women generated that. 5 Alberta women. And we're also going to honor an amazing leader in Anne McKay. She was the first person, the first woman to say, yes, I will help fund the Women Are Persons monuments. So we are very grateful. So that's October 15th. And on October 18th, which is Persons Day, we invite you to come to Ottawa and to meet the remarkable woman who is Canada's first and to date only female prime minister, and that is the Right Honorable Kim Campbell. This is an outstanding Canadian, and we're thrilled that she will be in Ottawa on October 18th. And if we could show that slide too, please. Yes, there she is. She's going to be launching a group that the Famous Five Foundation is involved with called the Women's History Project. This will take place on Persons Day. 4:30 is the VIP reception. 5:30 is open to the public and a presentation, and it will happen at the University of Ottawa. So that's in our nation's capital to pay tribute to the Right Honorable Kim Campbell. Also happening is the Famous Five maquette is still residing in Summerside, PEI. And what fun it's had in Summerside, and how thrilled I was to go to Summerside and attend the Lieutenant Governor Antoinette Perry's pink tea to welcome the Famous Five maquette, but also to pay honor to PEI's Famous Five. Yes, in 1993, the top 5 political officers in government were all filled by women. And we were honored to have 3 of these women attend the pink tea in Summerside, and that is the former premier of the province of PEI, the first woman to ever be elected as premier, Catherine Colbeck. Also attending was the deputy speaker from 1993, Libby Hubley, who went on to become a senator, as did Catherine Colbeck. The third person who is a member of the PEI Famous Five is the first and for many years the only female minister of finance, and that's Pat Malla. Shortly though, next week, the maquette is going to be moving to Mount St. Vincent University, which is celebrating 150 years of being a university, and it is in fact Canada's only all-female student university. We were hoping to have an event on the 18th, but instead we're doing it on October 11th. So that's just a week ahead, Wednesday. And we ask you to bring to send me the names of anybody that you would like to, if you'd like to attend the reception at Mount St. Vincent, or if you would like to suggest others who might join us at that time. So that's on October 11th. And the reason it's going to be on October 11th is because Michelle Obama is coming on Persons Day to Canada. There are still a few tickets available for the Scotiabank Centre in Halifax for this presentation. Now, I've sent notices to her publisher, to the U.S. Consul General of the Maritimes, to the sponsoring agencies to say, please make sure that Michelle knows that October 18th is Persons Day. And lastly, our next virtual pink tea will not happen in October because of the various activities, but please join us again November 3rd, and the final virtual pink tea for 2023 will be on December 1st. So now I would ask our participants to turn on your audio and to turn on your visual, your screens again, and to lead us in a toast which says, "To me, I'm a leader too." So I would ask you to put your shoulders back, to take a deep breath, and to say in a strong, clear voice, "To me, I'm a leader too." I'm going to count down from 5, and then we'll say it. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. To me.
To me.
I'm a
I am
leader
a
too.
leader.
I'm a leader too.
Okay, let's try this again. I forgot my cup, so sorry. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. To
To
me,
me,
To me.
I'm a leader
A
too.
leader too.
The spirit of the Famous Five is within all of you. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, attendees. Please remember to continue to feel equal to high and splendid braveries. Merci, miigwech. Thank you. See you in November. And remember, organize your own pink tea on October 18th or any day thereafter. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Five women fought the system, a system they knew was wrong. They wouldn't take no for an answer. They believed they belonged. It was an uphill battle. It seemed they could not win. Five women stood together, swore they never would give in. The power of their conviction still echoes through the years. They stood their ground and would not yield, undaunted by the fear. Truth was always on their side. Truth will always win. Five women stood together, swore they never would give in. Can you feel the fire burning from the torch they held high to guide us through the ages? Fill our hearts with pride. Can you feel the need to take that torch and keep the flame alive? If you do, they have passed to you the spirit of the famous five. Their work is still not finished. The world is still unjust. But when we fear to take a stand, their spirit says we must. The secret of their power, to find the courage to begin. Five women stood together, swore they never would give in. And can you feel the fire burning from the torch they held high to guide us through the ages? Fill our hearts with pride. Can you feel the need to take that torch and keep the flame alive? If you do, they have passed to you the spirit of the famous five. If you do, they have passed to you the spirit of the famous five. Emily Murphy, Henrietta Muir Edwards, Louise McKinney, Irene Parlby, and Nellie McClung. Heroes of mine, the famous five.